Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you. Core HRIR is here with its 11th webinar in the Learning Weekend series. I am Jyoti Sharma, your host for the day, and our thought leaders for today are Mr. Ashok Malhotra and Mrs. Shorburi Dasgupta Gomes. They'll empower us through their vision and insights on the topic Indianness, coaching, and the EUM frameworks and tools. I'm sure all of you must be as inquisitive about the topic as I am. Before we start with our power pack session for the day, I would love to share a little bit more about the core HRIR group. We are a group of 1,000 plus HR professionals connected globally through a strong string of knowledge. We have 500 plus HR leaders and CHROs and stalwarts from Fortune 500 companies. Together, we aim at fostering and nurturing this valuable relationship wherein we all learn, share, and grow together successfully in our both personal as well as professional lives. Our logo in black, blue, and yellow color demonstrates the values of wisdom, trust, and unconditional zest to work towards learning for one and all. Speaking more about the in our initiative, since our very inception, we have come up with the initiatives that play a catalyst role in grooming leaders for tomorrow through immensely enriched learnings from our experts. We have WhatsApp interactive platform wherein all the HR professionals network, collaborate, and share their expertise with each other. Our next initiative is the Learning Weekend series. This is a webinar series, and today we are on our 11th session. The next initiative that we have is the Chai Buddy series, wherein we are planning our next initiative very soon in the month of January. All HR professionals meet face to face, discuss new ideas, initiatives, industry practices, and all the latest trends, which helps everyone gain insight about the industry. Another initiative is the job board, essentially to provide all HR professionals with career opportunities in India and overseas. Our next initiative is the Shining HR Award, which aims at felicitating outstanding and deserving HR professionals. This was more about the core HRIR group. Moving on to our much awaited session for today, and I'm extremely privileged to introduce Mr. Ashok Malhotra. Ashok has been a process consultant for over 28 years and he has worked with top companies, more than 60 organizations, and covering various industries and multinational companies. He's been a management researcher, teacher, consultant, and has served in the public sector group for more than 10 years. He's currently on the boards of RAIL and also with eTrans Solutions, Kolkata. He's been the founder of Gender Diversity and Identity Lab from 2004 itself. He's also completed his internship from ISADS and has given significant contribution in the EUM framework. His multiple books have also been published, which includes the book Child Man, The Self Narcissist, and his recent publication has been Indian Managers and Organizations, Boons and Burdens. This book is currently available on Amazon as well. He's authored the Existential Universe Mapper framework and suite of tools, which has been deployed in over 100 organizations. We also are privileged to have with us our next thought leader, who is Mrs. Shorburi Dasgupta. She's working closely with Mr. Ashok Malhotra. She's been a principal consultant and executive coach for 20 plus years and has worked extensively in cultural leadership, strategic decision, strategic direction, change management, alignment and transformation, and has had significant contribution in diversity and inclusivity area, specifically related to gender diversity. So moving on to our topic, just a little bit about myself. I'm Jyoti Sharma. I'm currently working with British Council and have previously worked with companies like Aon Hewitt and IBM. And I possess total HR experience of more than 12 plus years. Moving on to our topic, which is Indianness, coaching, and the EUM frameworks and tools. It's quite an interesting topic, and let's go ahead and let's hear insights from our thought leader for today, Mr. Ashok Malhotra. Over to you, Mr.
Thank
Ashok.
you, Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you very much. Thank you, Veer, and the entire core HR team for giving us this opportunity to share with you some of our thoughts, insights, both about Indianness and the EUM framework. The two have a strong relationship, and that's why they have been put together in the same webinar, because the one of the significant triggers for development of the EUM framework was my interest in understanding the Indian context and my dissatisfaction of doing so through frameworks which were alien. And that's how the entire EUM thing came into being. I have seen many of the questions that a lot of you raised, and I must confess that there is no way we can do justice to all the questions that have been raised by many of you. It's such a wide range. So, in this particular webinar, we have tried to cover some of these, but the primary focus will be on understanding of the Indian context and the EUM framework. This would be the primary focus in this particular webinar. So, my apologies to those who may feel that their questions have not been addressed. What we would also do is that I would first share with you some of the my understanding about the Indian context and a brief introduction to the EUM framework. And then I will invite some of you to join in with your insights and questions before I hand over to my colleague Sharbari Gomes, who would take you through the EUM framework in a little more detailed fashion than I would. That's the way we will proceed. So let's begin with this issue of understanding of the Indian context. It would be fair to say that human beings, no matter where they share a lot in common. It doesn't matter whether they are from India or from China or from the US. The essential human questions, the essential human struggles, the essential human dilemmas have a lot in common. It's equally true that while there is a huge commonality, each culture, each civilization has its own unique nuances. And when one ignores these nuances, one ends up getting a very distorted picture. One civilization, for instance, may place greater emphasis on individualism. Another may place greater emphasis on collectivism. To look at each of these through each other's frame may give you a very distorted picture. So it's important to understand that culture, that universe, keeping in view some of its own nuances. So let me share with you, start with you, and I'm not going to go into great depth on this, but some of the main elements of the nuances of the Indian context. Jyoti, can you put up the first slide, please? Hello, are you there, Jyoti?
Yes, Ashok, the slide is on.
I can't see it.
Just
It's not. Is it showing in other people? So that's it's okay if it's.
It's not showing for me.
Anyway, as Jyoti struggles with the slide, let me put kind of talk about it. The Yeah, here it is. Some features of the Indian psyche. The first point it makes is that it is more relational than autonomous. Let me elaborate. If I were to ask you, who are you? Chances are that your response will be one of the two types. Either you will tell me about your propensities, your qualities, your attributes, your likes, your dislikes, etc. Or you will tell me about your systems of belonging as to where do you come from, which is which particular family, which particular community, what institutions you have been a part of, where do you work, etc. For most Indians, or for many Indians, it is more likely that the response will be of the second variety rather than the first variety. Very simply put, what is being said is that we as human beings define ourselves as autonomous entities, as also as relational entities. That is, we see ourselves in relation to the various systems to which we belong. Indians tend to have a little more leaning, and I emphasize these are leanings, these are not either ors. It's not that Indians don't have autonomy and other people don't are relational, but Indians tend to emphasize the relational side a little more than their autonomous side. Linked to that is the other feature, which is that contextuality plays a huge role in the Indian psyche. In fact, A.K. Ramanujan had, in a very brilliant article, which is called "Is There an Indian Way of Thinking?" has given this proposition that there are two broad ways in which people think. One is what he calls context free ways, and the other are context sensitive ways. Context free ways are ways of thinking which is in terms of absolutes, that this is true for in general, irrespective of the context. Whereas context sensitive ways are place everything in a context. Now, if you look at Indian approaches, let's say in medicine, or in arts, the entire emphasis goes in terms of relating it into a particular context. So you have to set the context for it. So you see the body not as, you don't see organs in separation, you see them in relation to each other. That's what's the total context. Even a notion like dharma, for instance, has a very strong contextual side. So you will have, the yug dharma, you will have your swadharma, you will have your kal dharma, you would have your dharma of the community to which you belong. You would even have something like apad dharma, that is the action which is appropriate under perilous circumstances. So context is a very significant part of the Indian psyche. Indians tend to think contextually rather than in absolute terms. I sometimes jokingly say that if a survey was to be conducted, chances are Indians would turn out to be the maximum users of the expression "it depends." For us, everything depends on what's the context in which something is being placed. The third element, which is significant in terms of understanding of the Indian psyche, is our preoccupation with hierarchy. Chances are that in India, there are more VIPs than the rest of the world put together. We are extremely concerned by and large with our status, and we tend to put it in terms of a hierarchical order as to who's higher and who's lower. So even a person who may not be very high in socioeconomic, hierarchy status, but when this person relates to people who he believes or she believes are lower than him, chances are that there is an expectation of being treated in a special way. So power distance between various positions of authority or hierarchy is pretty strong. What is also significant is that often the notion of hierarchy in our minds is linked to what is called the purity and pollution difference. So for us, hierarchy is not so much dependent upon acquisition of resources. So it's not that the person who has the most resources is the most powerful one or regarded as the higher one. The person who's regarded as the higher one is the one who's held as purer. So there is an expectation that the person who is higher also is a little more pure, and the person who's lower is a little more polluted. And that is why loss of respect for Indians is a big thing. Loss of respect means loss of authority, loss of power. So it's important that they are seen as a little higher, not just in terms of position, not just in terms of resources, but also as purer beings. Now, these have huge implications in terms of, and I'm only giving you some of the main ones. If you were to read the book which Jyoti was talking about, Indian managers and organizations, you would get a much better idea of how these are manifested in the day-to-day functioning of Indian managers and organizations. Indians in general, but I've focused a little more in terms of the organization, because these are things which in some ways have been derived partly by the insight from other scholars, partly from our own experience, and partly from our research data, which has been, from the EUM framework, which has been deployed. And we have seen these are some of the propensities which are shown. For the present, I would only focus a little bit in terms of to more as an illustrative thing, but let me remind you, this is not a session on coaching, so I'm not going to go deeply into the coaching thing. I'm using coaching as an example to show in terms of how these predispositions play out in a coaching setting. Jyoti, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. So in India, the coach is not seen as a professional. The coach is seen more as a guru. The difference is that with a professional, your expectation is specific and defined. Whereas with a guru, it's much more broad based. You expect the coach to be wiser. In fact, there are a lot of people who would bring to the coach not just the specific issues that are being engaged with, but more in terms of all the other issues that they may be dealing with. For instance, if you were to look at some of the either films or even real life experience in, let's say, business families, you would often find that there is a character called Guruji. Now, this Guruji is not just a advisor on spiritual matters. Often this Guruji is also consulted on financial matters about which he may know nothing, or he may also consulted perhaps on relational issues, on marital problems, and all kinds of things. So the idea is not that he is a professional here. So the same gets translated when you are relating to a coach. So the coach becomes a little more coaching, therefore, is not so much of a structured arrangement as perhaps it may be in some other settings. In India, it is a lot more free flowing, and there is an expectation of a higher personalized connect between the coachee and the coach. Oftentimes, for instance, the coaching is not just an opportunity for clarifying, learning, etc. Coaching becomes also an opportunity where the individual is seeking a certain quality of affirmation and nourishment from the coach, not just professional help in a manner of speaking. I often find, for instance, many of my friends who are into coaching talk about how difficult it is in India to ask the person or the coachee to have her own coaching agenda. Invariably, if when you start the coaching arrangement and you ask the person and say, okay, what do you wish to get out from here? There's a good chance that the coachee will turn around and say, you tell me what do I need to learn? You tell me what do I need to know? So therefore, it's almost as though the entire responsibility. Now, some of these processes, when looked at through external Anglo-Saxon lenses, seem very, you would say this is a sign of immature dependency in the Indian psyche, which partly it is. But that's not the whole truth. The whole truth is that in our minds, the entire thing is configured differently. So long as we keep looking at ourselves through external lenses, chances are we will get a very distorted picture of where we are. Like, for instance, I was talking about the context sensitivity. Now, what happens because of context sensitivity? That in the Indian psyche, contextuality is a lot more important than consistency. So, consequently, when looked at from context free lenses, Indians appear as very hypocritical people, people with a lot of double standards. The, from the individual's point of view, it's not double standards or hypocrisy. It is actually adapting to a certain context and finding a context appropriate response. So I think the entire EUM framework has developed as an attempt to understand the Indian context through a different lens, through in a different way than what it gets thrown up through traditional frameworks. Can we move on, Jyoti, to the next slide? So let me tell you what EUM is. It's a comprehensive framework for understanding individuals, collectives. By collectives, we mean groups, families, organizations, and the relationship between them. Now, one of the significant things about EUM is that we have, the same framework is used to look at both the individual and the organization, so it becomes easier to relate the two. There are three main components. One is called EUM individual. The other is called EUM organization, which is used to map the organization. And there is impact, which actually looks at the relationship between the two. In this webinar, we will only be talking mostly about EUM I and maybe to some extent EUM O. We are not going to touch into impact. We don't have the time. Can we move on, Jyoti? The framework was inspired by work of Graves on theories of levels of existence. One of the significant contribution of Graves was that Graves said that it is very difficult or it is counterproductive to understand people piecemeal. You must look at a person as a whole. You can't say, I'm now studying the person's needs, values, behavior, etc. All this forms a composite whole, and the person needs to be understood as a totality. Jung has also follows the same principle, that in many ways it also departs very significantly from Graves' work. I'm not going to go into those details, but it takes Graves' essential position that you have to look at the individual as a totality. Jung also has a strong influence on with Indian approaches like pluralism, non-linearity, and I've already talked of context sensitivity. By pluralism, what I mean is that there is no one absolute truth. There are multiple truths. And you can't look at things only in terms of linear cause-effect relationship. I think this will become clearer when we look at how Hume differs from traditional psychometry. Can we go on to the next slide, Jyoti? Okay, let me first go this. So in its sense, Hume posits that there are 6 universes which reside within each individual. Each universe is a composite system of needs, wants, attitudes, beliefs, etc.
Ashok, can I come in here?
Yeah, sure.
Can you please tell people that why do we call them universes? I think that helps.
So you're going to say something? You see, because I've already said that. Na?
Okay.
It's because these are composite, it's a composite whole. It's not the individual is not just one thing, right? There are multiple things which are operating, and we are not, and these are not in terms of discrete levels. Okay.
Right.
You want
So what
to
you're
add
really saying is that, yes, I'm saying what you're really saying is that the reason we call them universes and not levitates or steps, etc., because we have a composite system of, the way we
Correct.
behave, the way we look at our peers, the way we look at our authority, the way we look at our aspiration, etc., etc., and the way we look at the world as well. So each one of them have a
That's
composite system. Each one of them teaches us something, and so that's why we call
that.
them universes. Yeah.
Hmm. Correct. And also, these are not levels, because there is, on the face of it, there is a similarity. Often these universes are looked at as levels, that some are better than the others. So
It is correct.
that's the reason why we use the term universes, that all are equally important.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we use Hume, what we do is we look at how an individual sees himself or herself, but equally importantly, how does the individual feel and think about it? As I often say, that human beings don't just feel and think, we also feel and think about the way we feel and think. So it's not enough for me to say that, look, this person thinks that he's an introvert. I also need to know as to how does this person feel about being an introvert. Does he like being an introvert? Does he not like being an introvert? So it's you're not just looking at as an absolute kind of thing. Can we move on to the next one? I think some of these will become clearer when we look at how Hume differs from traditional psychometry. And I think the first is most important. And if you got a hang of the first, you will get the hang of all the others. In traditional psychometry, self is regarded as a noun. So it's essentially, the attempt is to put this individual under the microscope and study its properties. So just as you study the physical properties of a person, like blood pressure, temperature, height, weight, similarly in psychometry, you study the psychological properties of this object called the self. Hume departs from this approach. In Hume, self is not a noun, self is a verb. Self is something which is constantly changing. Self is always in movement. It's like a flowing river. And as the saying goes, you can't step into the same river twice. That's also, the river changes its course according to the terrain through which it is flowing. These become extremely important. We sometimes use the analogy of a kaleidoscope, that there are various things which are happening within the individual, and there are multiple facets which configure into a certain form. And so human beings are dynamic, they are not static objects. Therefore, in Hume, you are not focusing on types and traits, you are focusing on interplay and patterns. You don't say these are your strengths or these are the individual's weaknesses. You try and see what is happening to the different parts of the individual, how they are configuring into a pattern, how they are engaging in a certain kind of a context, and what would be the consequences. So the best that you can say is that it is likely that this individual is will operate in a particular way, would respond in a particular way in this kind of situation. So you do not look, say, for instance, that this person is high on interpersonal competence or low on interpersonal competence. What you say is that this person in these kinds of interpersonal situations is likely to behave or engage in this manner or in some other manner. Whether they will be effective or not will find out from the individual as upon the appropriateness of it into a context. So how does this fluidity of the self is very, very central in understanding of people. And that's where, as Shabri was saying, we look at this as an interplay of multiple universes, which are it's like an internal psychodrama. There are these five characters within yourself who are sometimes in harmony. Sometimes they are fighting with each other, and some are muted, some are more active. So how do they actually play out is what Jung tries to map. Before we go into the specifics of the six universes, uh, just as there are six universes at the individual level, there are six universes at the organization level. Jyoti, can we go to the next one? So there are corresponding organizational universes. What they mean, I think in a little while, Sharbari will be talking about it. But before that, let me stop for a while and invite any questions, comments, observations, insights that any of you may have. Jyoti, have you received any questions or comments or?
Not at the moment. We can go ahead with the slides, and in the meanwhile, we'll take up queries
Or,
once.
or you want or you want to wait for 2-3 minutes and see if there's anything which anyone has to share, add, ask?
We can proceed with the next slide, and we'll take up questions in the end.
Okay. Do you want to take them through the six universes?
Yes, please. I will do that. Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Excited to be here. So go to the next one. Okay. So what I will do is, my name is Sharbari, as Jyoti has said, and I will take you to the universes. The universe of belonging and protection. The moment we say, look at the name, it is that part of us which is within us, which wishes to belong, feel safe, where we feel secure and protected. So in this universe, the primary orientation that we will all have, either to a higher degree or to a lower degree, is to feel familiar, feel predictable, have harmony, and strong identification with people who are our own kith and kin. This universe, each of the universe teaches us something. So this universe teaches us to have trust and faith in our people. It teaches us to abide by the established customs and experience a sense of pride in our own heritage. It also gives us a very strong sense of oneness with the group that we belong to. Could be family, could be organization, could be any other place that we belong to, maybe even with friends, and enable us to, accept all the positives as also its angularity. You remember this particular advertisement by ITC, which is of this little snacks, which says "Tera hai par mera hai." Like although it is crooked, but it's very healthy. So this whole idea that is I belong to you, they belong to me, and it's all right to have a little bit of angularities. However, when this orientation is not very high in us, as it would happen for a lot of us, sometimes it may end up make us feel rootless, may not gives us a sense of having a home, etc., etc. On the other hand, when this orientation is very high and we identify with this orientation to a great extent, it might also generate for some of us a fear of the outsiders, may have a misguided sense of outsiders, people who are outside of this group, and a fear of disturbances. Let's look at some of the features. Jyoti, can we look at the features? And as you read through, some of you will identify closely and some of you may not identify. Some of you may identify with some and some will identify with some others. But we all have, like Ashok was saying in EUM, we relate to it in terms of our identification and our valuing. How we feel about being here. All three. How we identify, whether we value or not value, and how do we feel about this. Can we go to the next? This is called universe of strength and desire. In universe of strength and desire is actually this is about focused on fulfillment of our desire, and it's about how central I am. Fulfillment of our desire will be through our strength and our power. The primary orientation of this universe is through curiosity, assertion, adventure, aliveness, excitement, and this universe, when it gets, in us, when we are in touch with this, it enables us to feel to dream for ourselves, invest in developing our power, question the established, ways of, what the context is. Sometimes we may even push the envelope a little. We would like to the world. We would undertake heroic journeys. We would expand our horizons. And we will have a sense of dominance. In India, to have a sense of dominance over others or being dominated by others. When this orientation is subdued in us, or we identify with this a little less, we might find it difficult to identify what is our real need and our wishes. Or we may find it a little difficult to assert our own position, engage with conflict and negotiation. And maybe find it may difficult to have a strong sense of self-belief. On the other hand, if the orientation is excessive and we identify with this very strongly, we may tend to look at other people as either as potential enemies to be conquered, or as objects of our need fulfillment, or self-aggrandizement, that we are we have the power, others are less, and we can do whatever we want. So as a result may give us an unrealistic and exaggerated idea of who we are, and may at times leave us unwilling to acknowledge what are our vulnerabilities, what are our uncertainties, and what are our limitations. Shall we move on to the next? Universal order is a part of us that relates with the world in an orderly fashion, so that we know what exactly is to expect from others, and we know what is exactly expected of us. The primary orientation is towards smooth functioning, towards towards having balance, towards having clarity, adjustment, and appropriateness. So when we value this universe, we believe in the appropriateness of what belongs where, what exactly should happen, what is the role appropriate behavior. We know how a boss should behave, how a father should behave, how a mother should behave. Everybody should have a role appropriate behavior. When we identify and value this universe, it gives us a sense of proportion and the ability to respect that everybody has a boundary. We respect other people's boundaries and we protect our own. It gives us the ability to look at situations without getting too influenced by our feelings and prejudices. It also enables us to accept that our lives are intertwined with other people, and it's only when that each one of us performs our appointed role in an appropriate manner that we can coexist. One simple example, as when you drive or you're being driven. Some of you may get really upset when fellow drivers are not following rules. Sometimes we usually say, if only everybody in this world followed rules and did what they're supposed to do, that the world will be a much better place. Now, that is the orientation in this universe. In this universe, we attempt to work out appropriate systems and processes in every place that we are in to deal with different situations. We usually try and instill a sense of discipline in ourselves and in others, and ensure that everybody and I adhere to mutually agreed rules, norms, and systems. However, when this orientation is subdued or we don't really respect systems, it becomes difficult for us to adhere to any systemic discipline. And as a result, all rules and regulations may appear unnecessary impediments. And we may find it very difficult to be part of any system and expect and give the system what it expects from us. On the other hand, when this orientation is excessive and we identify with this with very strongly, we may become, stickler. We may become dogmatic. We may become rigid, over controlling, and our expression may become inhibited and may become intolerant of any deviance or alternative perspectives from others. Innovation, for instance, may become a casualty over engaged in this universe. The fourth one is the universe of aspirations and purpose. What we mean by purpose here is about achieving and striving towards a higher level of achievement and recognizing that this is possible only by forging mutually beneficial links with others. So, at one level, we understand that I can't really achieve until and unless others are work closely with me in collaboration. So, the primary orientation of this universe is towards purposiveness. Do I have a purpose in my success? How do I move with a goal oriented action? And resourcefulness. And the resourcefulness is often gets translated into how competent I am, how skillful I am, how much knowledge do I have. And so, therefore, it enables us to invest in our own capabilities as also respect the capabilities and resourcefulness of others. So that in a way, it helps us both to accomplish our goals and respect other people's skillfulness. This whole idea of this universe is that we accomplish along with others. And so, who the others are, whether they come from which background that they come from, their color, what language do they speak, becomes far less important than what he or she brings to the table. Simultaneously, this universe or identification with this universe also makes us recognize that the world values us not for who we are or what family do I come from, but what do I have to offer. And finally, it helps us to relate with others both in a collaborative and in a competitive manner. When this orientation is subdued or we do not identify with this universe in a way, what happens is we may end up experiencing a sense of drift, may experience a lack of direction for ourselves, maybe a lack of direction for what we wish to achieve in life, a sense of self waste, and a sense of aimlessness. It may also become difficult to firm up our ambitions or work towards fulfillment of those ambitions. On the other side, what is overly dominant, and we identify with this universe over every other universe and extremely dominantly, it may enable us to or may make us look at others only as instruments of performance or utility. As in, for instance, I may only, as a individual, relate with others saying, what is it that you can help me do, rather than the individual as a whole. So I would only look at other person's competence and skills and not relate to the person as a whole. So I may end up experiencing loss of human touch. I may have a fear of being obsolete in the current place. I may also have a feeling of being burnt out and being in a constant state of overdrive, not just for me, but also others who are working with me. The fifth and the last universe that we talk about here in this particular webinar, it's called the universe of intimacy. And as the heading mentioned, this is that part of us which wishes for and works towards a world where everyone can live in peace and harmony. It's different from the first universe of uh, belonging and
Protection.
belonging and protection. In the belonging and protection, we talk about harmony, but in the close circle with our kith and kin. In this universe, wish for everyone can live in peace towards what is the quality of life that not only I have, but others also have. Is towards, is my life meaningful? Do I have intimacy? Do I have a sense of compassion and empathy and respect for others, irrespective of their clan and creed? This universe enables us to feel within a larger human context. So, for instance, if I'm part of an organization, not only will I look at my particular subsystem, but I will also look at the whole system and saying, what is the nature? How are they working in this organization? I would also say, what is the organization doing? Is this organization's work and its products, is it good for human being outside in the society? For instance, yesterday I was reading that Johnson and Johnson apparently knew for a long time that had asbestos in it. And I'm wondering, for instance, people who are caregivers would actually feel terrible working in Johnson and Johnson knowing that the baby powder had asbestos, because it ultimately goes and impacts us. So people in this particular universe would be concerned not just about the inside organization or inside of the system, but also say, how are we interconnected? How are we impacting the larger context that we're a part of? And people would dream collectively for a world that would ensure a higher level of well-being for everyone. In short, this universe helps us to accept ourselves at a human level beyond issues of class or category or ethnicity, etc. When this universe is subdued or when we do not identify with the universe, we may experience at times ourselves as fairly self absorbed. We may not feel as much empathy and compassion. We may become over consumptive. And more importantly, we may find ourselves, constantly being in some activity or the other and dry and maybe alone. On the other hand, when this universe is excessive, we over identify. We may even become impractical and unable to accept that strife or wishing for advancement, wishing for order, wishing for competitiveness is just as important for human existence as is harmony. And so when we are over engaged in this universe, our tolerance for anything that disrupts this idyllic scenario may become low, and we may wish to either ignore it or suppress it, both in ourselves and in others. Okay, over to you, Ashok.
Okay, as you would have seen, we have covered only 5 universes. We have not covered the sixth universe. The reason why we have not covered the sixth universe, because the sixth universe essentially engages with how we deal with these 5 universes. These are the 5 universes which are operating, and sometimes these universes support each other, sometimes they conflict each other. For instance, your need for adventure may conflict with your need for safety. Your need for loyalty may conflict with your need for uniform application of rules irrespective of your relationships. So there are all kinds of tensions between the universes. The central theme of Hume is that all these are part of every human being. How they relate with each other, how these different facets relate with each other is what is important. Not whether there is no person who has no UVP or no USD or no URB or anything like that. They may be a little higher or a little lower, some may be more prominent, some may be less prominent. But it is the interplay between these universes which is the most important thing. So, what we try and do through the Hume framework is to map what is the nature of the interplay which is taking place, what is the quality, what is the script, the internal script which the individual is experiencing, and in the process what parts of his or her potential are getting actualized and what parts of his or her potential are getting ignored. So how best can one help the individual? So the primary focus in working with Hume is not to put people into certain boxes, or not to say you are like this or you are like this, you are type A or you are type B. The idea is how can we help in the person to get a little better understanding of what's happening internally and what may be some of the aspects which this person may not be paying adequate attention to. What may be some of the inner voices which are not being heard? Can we help the person listen to those voices so that some of the potential which this individual has can come to the surface? Before I go into what are some of the ways in which Hume is deployed, Jyoti, are there any questions at this stage?
Yes, we do have a question from
Okay.
Manpal Singh. What he wants to understand is that there are a lot of change dynamics at workplace. So in a
Yeah.
situation like this, how do we feel stable in organizations or in our jobs or
Mm,
within the society and be
mm,
at comfort and in command with ourselves? Is it
mhm.
our competencies and behavioral aspects that would help us play a major role in the same, or is it something else?
Well, I think one of the things, what happens is when there is a flux, there is a propensity for people and systems to find ways and means to make things predictable and have a certain degree of control and mastery over it. I believe this is not going to work in times to come. In times to come, we will need to learn to live with uncertainty. We will need to learn to live with things are not going to work out in the way that, just to how best can I plan and control. So what we'll have to do, and that's where I think Hume has a significant statement to make, that in Hume the basic proposition is that fluidity is inherent to human beings and to human systems. How best we deal with this fluidity, how do we harness the potential of the individual and the system and use this fluidity in a way that this can be done is much more important, rather than to try and make things predictable and bring them under control.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking this up.
Anything else?
Not at the moment.
Okay. So some of the areas in which Hume has been deployed, as you can see, is in executive coaching and mentoring, of course, in leadership development, team building, institution building, business strategy, organization diagnosis and culture studies, etc. Now, one of the things which Hume uniquely offers is that it's a framework which helps you to look at both the individual and systems in conjunction with each other. How do they relate with each other? What kinds of things? What is the picture in the mind which the individual is carrying about the system? Because, as I said, and linking it back to what we had originally started with, in terms of the emphasis on contextuality in the Indian psyche, that in through Hume, you don't try and understand a person as an autonomous, separate entity. In Hume, you try and look at a person in relation to the context to which this person belongs. Because this person is constantly, human beings are constantly looking at the context and then trying to find a response which they believe is appropriate to the context. In this process, they sometimes ignore some parts of themselves and sometimes they ignore some parts of the context. So, how does one enhance the ability of the individual to look at the multiplicity of the context? Multiplicity is a very, very key element in the entire Hume framework. If I was to say what are some of the key principles in Hume, one is, of course, multiplicity. Second is that there are no absolutes, that this is absolutely true in all situations. Everything is contextual and has to be seen in relation to what it is. No aspects of you know, part of being human is potentially positive or negative. It becomes positive or negative depending upon how it is deployed. Everything has something which has potentially something meaningful to offer to us. How do we enhance? How do we ensure that these multiple aspects of ourselves operate in a way which is coherent? That's what Hume attempts to do, whether it be at the level of the individual or it be at the level of the system or the organization.
Ashok, may I come in?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I just wanted to tell everyone that, while they have gone through the universes and what Hume does is, also how does it get worked with, while you already know where we want to go.
Yeah.
areas of deployment. Very quickly, the test, which is an online test. There's a automated report for executive coaching and mentoring that comes with themes that the individual is measured on, and the individual know how the successes are mapped in the person. Identification and valuing, etc., is part of that test. That's an automated report. There is one more report which is for not just the individual but also for the coach, with specific details to the coach about how to coach this individual, what would be some of the unique areas of coaching style. We are working on a leadership development report which should be ready in by April. And when we work with team building or institution building, etc., etc., we use both EUM I and EUM O. The EUM I gives us the clear orientations about the manager or the person, and the EUM O gives us the how the manager is actually having a picture of the organization in the mind. So for instance, if I'm a manager and I'm extremely peace loving, or I like harmony, or and I like order, unlike somebody else some time back, and I'm working in an organization which is going through constant change, everything is really stable, what would be the picture of that organization, and therefore what would be my core areas of coaching, comes out very well to both the UMO picture with the coach. So there are many ways that we work with UMI and UMO in terms of this. So just wanted to tell you that these reports are very much available. And if we can go to the next slide.
No, just
Yeah,
one
sure.
thing. Just one thing. I think this was also a question which had been asked by someone
Yeah.
in terms of recruitment. Now, UM is also has been used for in recruitment kind of context. But what we recommend is that it should be used only as an exploratory framework to identify what are some of the things which need to be found out about the individual. What are some of the things which you should explore at the time of interview and things like that? It is not generally not used in terms of so we have said assessment for recruitment and competence mapping, but it is not a yes no kind of a thing.
Um,
Okay.
in fact, Ashok, we have received questions from Vishal Verma and Naipal Singh who would want to know more with regards to UM related to competency mapping and its
Okay.
applicability.
All right. So that exactly in what you do in UM is that you look at all competency in terms of their different facets. So, for instance, when we look at competency, let's say, take anything, let's say interpersonal competency. So, what we would be looking at as to what kind of interpersonal situations would this person find easy to negotiate with? What kinds of situations this person would find difficult to negotiate with? So, when even in the reports which come, the reports will say in these kinds of situations would be easy for this person, these kinds of situations would be more difficult. So competencies in UM are contextualized. Competencies are not treated as absolutes.
All
Does
right.
that answer the question, Jyoti, or is there anything else?
Definitely, it does.
Okay. Any other question, or this was the only question?
Yes, we have one more question from Sai Kothai, wherein he
Yes.
wants to understand how can Indianness be approached in global organization, wherein leadership expectations are based on roles and performances rather than wholeness.
Okay. Would Sai, in fact, one of the basic propositions that is made in the book that I'm talking about, Indian Managers and Organizations, that there is, for far too long, our notions of looking at management and leadership have been through Anglo-Saxon frames. The perspective has been what in the book we have called is based on certain assumptions about human existence. Whereas the Indian perspectives offer a very different perspective, different set of assumptions about human existence. And it is important that I'm not saying that they are wrong and we are right, nor that we are wrong and they are right, but both are, these are valuable. And the future of organizations, future of mankind in is dependent upon how these two perspectives are co-held. In the book, we have called these as ERA as one kind of a perspective and RBH as the other kind of a perspective. And I'm not going into the details of what they mean, but these are different set of beliefs and assumptions about human existence. And it is how well they are held. And I believe one of the reasons why at least some of the Indian managers are doing extremely well even in global setting is because they are able to perspectives. Whereas by and large in the Anglo-Saxon frames, it is only one kind of a thing which gets highlighted. This thing I think is important not just from Indian point of view, but also from the larger view.
In Ashok?
Yeah. Right.
May I come in,
Jyoti, is that
Ashok,
it?
1 minute?
Yeah, please. Yeah, please.
I just wanted to add to this answer that Ashok had, is that recently with managers all over Europe and and we are going to work in China with the same tool. And the experience that we have had in working with them is that their experience of EUM is exactly the same as us, in a sense that the whole being human and looking at business is not just an Indian specific thing. It's also there in other cultures, and when they look at this, they really appreciate that. So the whole business of being part and being whole, both are see universal way of looking at human beings.
All right. I think we already overshot the time. There's only one slide. Can we just quickly go through that, Jyoti?
Sure.
This only tells you in terms of if you are interested in terms of becoming a EUM practitioner for regular programs, the certification programs on both and EUM O. But before you come for EUM O, you have to be a EUM I practitioner. And then, of course, there are various other things which are offered along with that. So that's how one can go on, take what is called a thematic report and see what it means for the person. Anything else you want to add, Sharbari? Because you're already 4 minutes behind schedule. So, Jyoti, anything? Can we sign off?
There's just one question. We understand it's a very unique and dynamic concept, and it
Yeah.
really
Hello.
yes. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I wanted to understand, it's a very unique and dynamic concept, and it helps in mapping individuals and organizations. How does it help in strengthening the employer-employee and peer relationships?
Oh, very. That's if you. I said there are three facets. One is individual, second is organization, and third is impact, which is about individual organization interface. That is primarily looked at. The focus in that is to see what are the propensities which people are bringing in, and what are the propensities which the organizational needs, requirements, vis-a-vis what are the propensities of the individual. So impact tries and what are the areas of alignment and what are some of the areas of misalignment. Now the important thing is that in EUM the basic belief is that alignment is not always good and lack of alignment is not always bad. Lack of alignment in fact gives you an to move further, to make shifts which are, because excessive alignment can be collusive in nature. Similarly, when it comes, we work with teams, look at the entire team in terms of how they are working, not just as individual entities, but also in terms of collective. So there is a various ways in which this is attempted.
Absolutely.
All
So
right. Yeah.
we also, if you could share some practical examples of EOM applicability, since it's, now being existingly used in more than 60 organizations,
Well, it's been used in more than 100 organizations.
more than 100 organizations. Absolutely.
But then, 60 maybe is what maybe I'm done. But there are many people who are also, in today, I think must be around 120 or 130 organizations. So what we invariably often many times in some organizations, for instance, one organization we worked with this was a group of companies where we worked with. We looked at the individual companies and the entire group, propensities of the individual CEOs together, and we all worked together. Now, this entire thing led to some significant shifts in terms of forming, how they were working at a certain kind of group level. Up that there were certain integrative processes which needed to be done at the group level were not being done. There were certain aspects which needed to be left to individual companies which was not being done. It also threw up some of the areas where there was needs of the organization and the propensities of the individuals. They needed to be realigned with each other. So there were several things, issues of this kind, which got thrown up. So what typically happens after exercises of this kind, a certain kind of a blueprint emerges, a blueprint of what needs to be attended to, what needs to be done at the organization level. At the individual level, of course, it works in terms of the individual's own coaching, mentoring, development, and stuff like that. So they're all very kind of one organization, for instance, we're working with them in the area of gender and diversity, the EUM framework, and seeing how their orientation, because if we are not gone into all these details, but all these universes have certain orientation. For instance, if you're predominantly a clan organization, you would look at the entire issue of diversity and inclusion in a particular way. If you are a organization which is more arena-ish, you would look at it in another way. How the basic identity of the organization is getting reflected in its various facets, including its business strategy. Because one of the basic principles over here is that identity precedes strategy. That what strategy you will see, aspects of the environment you will see, and what aspects of the environment you will not see, depends upon your identity. So the most important, whether it be at the level of individual or at the level of organization, is to understand the identity of the system.
Right. Uh, in fact, we have one more question from Deepak sir. What he states is beliefs are the biggest enemy in context to success and growth. And definitely, one should work on the path to seek and not limit the potential.
I haven't heard the first part. What is this thing?
Sure.
What was the first sentence you said?
The first sentence is, while we are working on a lot of beliefs and assumptions, it really is the biggest
Yeah.
enemy in terms of context to success and growth because it limits the
It's
potential
biggest.
of individuals.
Okay.
So, what would
Okay.
be
Yeah.
your recommendation on and view on that?
All right. You see, while what he is saying is true, it is equally true that you cannot operate without beliefs and assumptions. You always need beliefs and assumptions. If you don't have beliefs and assumptions, right now I'm talking on the belief and assumption that my voice is reaching you, or certain kinds of things are happening, or there are certain things which are important. So beliefs and assumptions are necessary. Means when they are frozen, when they become the only dogmas. And that's where, in terms of Hume, what it kind of keeps telling you, because of the multiple universes which are operating within the individual or the system, that different sets of beliefs and assumptions are at play. There is not just one set of belief and assumption. They become enemies, beliefs and assumptions get frozen. But one needs beliefs and assumptions. So the only thing one can do is to continuously work with them, continuously operate and examine them. As my teacher Pulin Garg used to say, I have no certainty either. What he meant was that there's nothing which is certain and, foolproof for all times to come. But yes, simultaneously, when one is acting, one has to act with a certain kind of a conviction that this is what it is.
Great. Thank you so much, sir. So we really don't have any more questions. I think we've covered all the questions that have come up from the audiences.
Okay, and we already, I think, 12 minutes.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
Thank you very much, Jyoti. Thank you very much, all the audience, core HRIR. It was fantastic.
great. Thank you so much for your time, Ashok and Chaudhary. In fact, it's been an excellent learning session on such a unique topic. And it was pleasure having both of you here with us today and a golden opportunity for all of us to learn. Um, uh,
thank,
you know, I'm sorry.
yeah, carry on, Jyoti.
Sure. A big thanks to all the audience who attended the session today. We would also request Ashok sir and Chaudhary to share the URL for the reports, and we'll be happy to share that with the audience so they could gain more insights on the topic.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, a privilege to be here, all of you. I wish I could have heard some voices, but that's very difficult with a large group like this. But it was really well of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Perhaps that'll be the next, way ahead, wherein we would look forward to have a more interactive platform so we could hear from the audiences also.
That kind of enlivens the whole thing a lot more. Thanks a
Absolutely.
time, Jyoti. Thank you, V. Thank you, Coach.
Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you, Veer. Thank you, everyone present.
Thank
Thanks
you.
everyone, all of you.
Bye bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ashok.
Bye.
Bye.
We would request the audience to share their feedback with us so we could continue working on betterment of our future sessions. And a big thanks to Veer, Bhanu, Kirti, Kashish, and Anu, and many more people behind the scene for their never ending support. And thanks a lot, Ashok, sir, and Chaudhary.
Bye bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye bye.